There's a lot of us who would love to be associated with their own family-owned business. My family managed it for a while. They owned the biggest shipping line in the northeast of England, the Nautilus Steam Shipping Company, right up to 1930, when it went bust. And it appears that that may be part of a wider trend, the decline of family-owned businesses in the West. It's not a trend that happens at all in Asia. In Asia, family-owned businesses are thriving. Someone who's been looking at this, Dr. Ajay Bhalla, he actually spoke at Thomas Schmidheiny's big conference on this issue in Hyderabad in India, the third Asian International Conference of Family-Owned Businesses recently. Dr. Bhalla is with me now. Dr. Bhalla, why is it that there is this difference between the West and the East?
There is two specific reasons. One is the declining role of family as an institution within the West, family as an entity and family as a living entity. And second, the greater emphasis on creating corporate governance structures which align the interests of owners and managers in a greater depth. If I was to look at the ownership structures, for example, increasingly there is an emphasis on creating transparency, that family takes more and more of a back seat and leaves the business to the top management. Then it happens elsewhere. So there is a greater emphasis, for example, on planning the exit of the family when the business reaches at a particular stage.
I suppose a really important thing it's almost a starting point. Is it better to have family-owned businesses? Do they actually outperform the businesses which are set up in the standard Western corporate manner?
I get worried when I listen to outperformance as a variable. We got to look at performance as a longer-term time horizon, and recently we were looking at employee-owned businesses within the UK, and looking at the family-owned businesses. If we look at the 10-year spectrum, the family-owned businesses tend to be much more risk-averse. They tend to take risks much more calculated. There's less M&A. However, they tend to shed people less than non-family-owned businesses. There's a greater long-term performance because the family owners want to create a legacy. They want to transfer the business to the next generation. It is preservation of not just families and businesses' wealth, but also preservation and extension of families' reputation in a long-term horizon.
So you're saying they actually have a much longer-term set of objectives. And it's interesting you mentioned reputation, because that's something which, of course, in recent times has become a buzzword in Western corporate circles. But you're saying in family-owned businesses, that's key to the whole thing.
Yes, because the key point is not just the identity of the business, but the identity of the owners. There is a lot of research which looks at when family-owned businesses acquire or invest, the implications which it has for the companies which they have acquired. I can look at a number of cases in the West as well, where family-owned businesses have acquired non-family-owned businesses, and even though they had to take a greater amount of debt, they've kept it floated because the reputation of the family was absolutely vital to the owners.
I know when you spoke at this extremely prestigious conference, you had several examples. Can you give us some examples of where it goes right for a family-owned businesses and where it goes wrong?
One of the examples actually we looked at and is fascinating is Merck.
The drug company, the German drug company.
The German drug company. Now it's a German and it's not Eastern. However, the company is interesting, set up in 1668. And still is family owned. As 11th generation is the gentleman from the 11th generation is the CEO, and the 13th generation is also currently entering the business. So currently they have 110 family members who are partners, considered as partners. And they predict that in 2040 they are likely to have 240 to 300 family partners within the Merck.
Goodness, that almost sounds too much. I'll come back to that in a moment. But an example that I know you've talked about where things haven't gone so well, perhaps, is the luxury goods maker Hermes.
Yes, Hermes is an interesting example because the family, after the death of the C. Patrick Dumas, who's the CEO, family member, the family sort of has taken a back seat and sort of looks at the role of the family more in terms of managing the family wealth rather than actually managing Hermes as a family business. And those are two different things, because once the family takes a back seat, it cannot actively direct or set the setting stone for a family business to look in a longer term horizon.
This whole issue of as families sort of go down the generations, more and more people become involved. You said with Merck it was in the hundreds. There must come a point where that is unmanageable, and that's the downfall of a business.
Yes and no. Yes, because it's incredibly difficult and you must do certain things right. The role of the leader is absolutely vital. Families do, in terms of cousin consortium stage, do two things. They have two options. One is to create formal governance mechanisms, formal family governance mechanisms, which create roles, identities, and structures and mechanisms to ensure that the family as an entity not only survives but continues to prosper. The second, which must go hand in hand, which is not so common in the business sense, is the informal family mechanisms, which are vital to creating not only communication, trust, but openness in terms of issues, very difficult issues such as succession.
One last question. You've done this extraordinary piece of research. What's the one takeaway, the one piece of advice that you can give to people who are involved with a family-run business now that will set them in the best possible chances of surviving the current times and continuing to prosper into the future?
There is a balance which they have to create in terms of maintaining a professional outlook of a business and still retaining the family identity. And they must look at guarding not only the family's interests but also the business interests, and they should do that in terms of long-term horizon, because it's not just creating a family identity, family expertise and family reputation, but also creating the business and family's reputation and identity.
The business has to work. Dr. Ajay Bhalla, thank you very much indeed for your time.
You.
Until next time on CAS Talks.